solve each equation, when we look at a on the left-hand side, can you see that it looks factored? But on the right-hand side, it is equal to 5x. The only time something factored is helpful is if it's equal to 0. So in this case, the fact that the other side is not equal to 0, we would first have to multiply this all out. So I'm going to FOIL that. 2x squared, my outside's minus 2x plus x minus 1 equals 5x. So I multiplied everything out, and now I'm going to bring the 5x over by subtracting 5x on both sides. Years of doing math, I can look at that and say, you can't factor it. So we have to use the quadratic formula or completing the square. Using the quadratic formula, negative b, our b value is negative 6, plus or minus b squared. Negative 6 squared is 36. Common mistake when you have a negative b is to square it and get a negative number, but any number squared is always positive. Minus 4 times a is 2, c negative 1, all over 2 times a. So we do all of that, and then we just need to simplify this, so we write out our numbers. X equals negative 6 would be positive 6 plus or minus the square root. 36 plus 8, 44 over 4. Now we're going to look at our square root. Can you simplify square root of 44? Yes, it's 2 root 11. Can you factor anything out of the top? You can factor out a 2, leaving you with 3 plus or minus square root of 11 all over 4. And now if you look at the 2 over 4, can that fraction be simplified? It would reduce to 1 over 2. And so our final answer will be 3 plus or minus the square root of 11 all over 2. Part B. In Part B, we have fractions. Now, we could use the quadratic formula here, first of all, by moving things over and making it equal to 0. However, then you would still have fractions you'd have to plug into the quadratic formula. If you don't want to work with fractions, what would you do to get rid of them here? If you times everything by 4, can you see that your fractions will go away? 4 times, so I'm going to multiply this whole side by 4 and this side by 4. I would get 2x squared minus 5x equals 12. And moving everything over to one side to make it equal to 0. And now you have a choice. If you want to factor or you want to use the quadratic formula. Well, I already factored in my head, so I would say factoring is easier. But if you couldn't see that you could factor it really quick, you may want to use the quadratic formula. So on a fairly, I'm saying for you right now, I think you would pick the quadratic formula over factoring. Okay? If you use the quadratic formula here, you would go x equals negative b, well, b is negative 5, plus or minus square root b squared, 25 minus 4, a is 2, c is negative 12, all over 2a. Okay? And simplifying this, we get x equals 5 plus or minus. Inside there, what are we going to get? 25 plus 96, which is 121 divided by 4. What is the square root of 121? 11. So anytime at this point, if I was using the quadratic formula and I found out, oh my goodness, look at that, the square root went away completely, I could have factored. As soon as your square root goes away completely, it tells you you could have factored. Now, what does this mean if we're solving this? Well, one of the answers will be with the plus sign. What happens if you do 5 plus 11 divided by 2? You get 16 divided by 2, which is 8. And one of them will be with the minus sign, so that would be 5 minus 11 divided by 2, which is negative 6 divided by 2, or negative 3. So our two answers are 8 and negative 3. Did I make a mistake somewhere? Oh, there's a 4 on the bottom. Sorry. Yes, there's a 4 on the bottom. What's 16 divided by 4? And a 4 on the bottom. 16 divided by 4 will be 4, and negative 6 divided by 4 is negative 6 over 4, which reduces to negative 3 over 2. Factoring is easier. So let's go up and look at the factoring. I'll do it in green underneath here. If you could factor, it would have to be 2x and x. Two things that multiply by 12, so your outside and inside make 5. 4 here makes 8, and 3 here. 8 and 3 will make 5. So it would be x minus 4 to get negative 8, plus 3 to get negative 5. Can you see from here that you would get x equals 4 and x equals negative 3 halves? So if you could factor it, that's a lot less work, a lot less writing, but more thinking. Right? There's the balance. Factoring does take more thinking. The quadratic formula is just plug numbers in and just simplify. So there's a little bit less thinking involved. But the factoring, what's the problem with factoring? Not everything factors. Okay? Plus, once you get the answer, you can kind of cheat and unfactor. Like if you know one of the answers is 4, you know one of the factors is x minus 4. And if you know the other answer is negative 3 halves, the other factor would have to be 2x plus 3. 7 to 13 for practice.